Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the first City Council meeting of the new year. We're going to try not to do too much damage tonight. Glad you're here. Hope everybody had a good Christmas and a Happy New Year. We'll go ahead and start off the agenda with the invocation by Assistant City Manager Vaughn Sullivan. Also, I'd like for you to welcome two cadets from Carl Albert ROTC program. They'll be offering our Pledge of Allegiance. Cadet Biggers, who's a junior, she plans to go to the Oklahoma State University when she graduates. Hostile crowd tonight. And Cadet Cooper, who is a sophomore at Carl Albert, and he plans to attend the United States Air Force Academy. So please stand for the invocation and Pledge of Allegiance.
Would you bow with me, please? Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the gorgeous day we had today. Father, we thank you and give you the glory and the honor for that. Father, we just ask that your Spirit be upon this meeting tonight, your blessing of discernment and wisdom be upon this council. And Father, we thank you so much for allowing them to serve in this way and serve this community. We just pray that they have, we know they have decisions before them tonight. Father, some of them are more routine, some of them are difficult. And I ask your wisdom and discernment be upon them in these decisions. We ask that that personal agendas be set aside and that decisions are made for the best of this entire community. Father, we thank you for this wonderful city we enjoy, this state, this nation, the freedoms we enjoy in this great nation. Father, we thank you for those men and women who are all over the world tonight and who are ensuring these freedoms and serving this great country. Give them peace and protection. Thank you for the blessing of your Son, Jesus. We thank you for the blood that was shed on the cross for our sins. And we ask these favors in your Son's holy name. Amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated.
Okay, we do have one proclamation to do this evening. We're going to correct a injustice that we committed last council meeting. So I would like the chair to meet me down front. Okay, I think we're good. Y'all, this is Sharon Mims. She's in the Girl Scouts, and she's quite a Girl Scout. And we're here to recognize her tonight. Whereas the Girl Scouts of Western Oklahoma strive to fulfill their mission to promote girls of courage, confidence, and character, and make the world a better place. Whereas Celeste Rogers is the troop leader for Girl Scout Troop 577, a troop known for outreach such as helping sustain community gardens and that grows produce for the Homeless Alliance and food pantries. Whereas Celeste wishes to recognize one of her scouts, Midwest City resident, Ms. Tiara Mims, for her incredible effort achieving the highest award in middle school Girl Scout can earn, the Civil Award. Whereas Tiara, along with her Girl Scout sisters Zoe Harris and Carson Rogers recently completed their Silver Award project entitled Escape the Vape, a campaign to educate teens on the dangers of vaping. They were inspired to tackle the issue of teen vaping since each had seen a peer vape and knew of the peers who vape. Whereas the Silver Award requires that their project address the root cause of the problem in their community, the girls determined that the root cause of the vaping problem is the lack of education. They believe that many of their peers think vaping is a harmless stress reliever and don't know the real dangers of vaping or how addictive it can be. Whereas the project included a poster, website, virtual escape room. All three were created by the girls. The poster debunked some of the more common vaping misconceptions and were hung in the bathrooms in each of the girls' schools with permission of the principal. The poster included a QR code to drive traffic to their website, www.escapethevaping.com, to educate the reader further. The website also includes a virtual escape room, which is a fun way to test the participants' knowledge. They spent their summer meeting as a group, individually researching and completing their tasks. Collectively, they logged over 60 hours toward the completion of this project. So therefore, I, Matt Dukes, Mayor of Midwest City, do hereby proclaim January 11th, 2023 as Tierra Mims Day in the city of Midwest City and urge everyone to congratulate her and encourage her in her future endeavors. Thank you for being here. If anyone thinks that we're in trouble with our future generation, that's an example that we're not. Okay, we'll move into community-related announcements. Mr. Lyon.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll start with our sales tax report for January, which includes the second half of December and the first half of January projected. Our sales tax is 3.56%. Sales and use tax is about 3.56% above what it was year over year. Versus our projection for the year, it was 3.19% for the month and 7.61% for the year. So December finished really well, and with the sales in Sooner Town Center and Sooner Rose was very busy. Yeah, looking at the other communities, Del City was a 0.49%. Moore was 1.54% down. Edmond was up 13.45. Norman was down 0.5. Oklahoma City was down 1.14. So we did really good compared to our comparables within the other cities. So. Next, the public is invited to attend the 26th annual Midwest City Dr. Martin Luther King Prayer Breakfast on January 16th, commencing at 7:30 a.m. at the Reed Conference Center. Tickets are $25 per person or $300 for a table of 8 and can be purchased at our community center or online at either ticketstorm.com or at PayPal. For additional information regarding tickets, ads, sponsorships, underwriting, and volunteer opportunities, contact Anthony Douglas at douglasimpas@aol.com or Deshaun Jones at djones@oicokc.org and Terry Fields 80@gmail.com, or you can call 405-427-8000. And there's several members here that can be bought if you wanted to buy tickets tonight. Sarah, you have tickets still, and Dawn?
Dawn, would you like to elaborate on how successful we've been this year?
Sure. Tickets are still available through Thursday if anybody's interested. They are over at the community center. So far, we have sold approximately 30 tables at 8 person per table, plus a multitude of additional single tickets. I believe our numbers are approaching and maybe above 400 for attendance for the MLK Prayer Breakfast next Monday.
So that'll be one of our larger turnouts definitely since COVID, it'll be our largest turnout, so good job, committee. We have several people here on that committee, so good job, guys. Trash and recycling services will operate per their normal schedule on Monday, January 16th. Tickets for the Midwest City's annual Daddy-Daughter Dance are on sale now. This event will be held Saturday, January 28th at the Reed Conference Center. Sessions are available for early afternoon, mid-afternoon, and late afternoon. Tickets can be purchased online through Eventbrite or over across the street at the community center. It's a great program. And finally, our youth league registration is now open for t-ball, softball, and baseball. All the information on the spring ball leagues can be found at midwestcityok.org. And as you recall, I think in a Friday update, I let the council know we have entered into a agreement with the city of Choctaw to utilize their fields and our fields jointly and kind of have home and away series. And it's going to be a really, really nice agreement with Choctaw and good for all the kids in eastern Oklahoma County to participate this year. So looking forward to that and hosting many games at the MAC. I think most weekends, Vaughn, are all weekends now scheduled at the MAC for like the next 10 months. Yeah, in the Reed baseball complex. Amazing. So Sunday mornings.
Sunday morning.
And with that, Mayor, that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Lyon. We move into our consent agenda, ladies and gentlemen. These items are placed on the consent agenda so that the council, by unanimous consent, can approve routine agenda items by one motion. If any council member requests an item to be heard or unanimous consent cannot be received, then the item or items will be removed and heard in regular order. Ms. Eads, you wanted to pull item 4?
I wanted to pull that too, yay.
The chair to entertain a motion to reflect that.
Wait a second.
I'm sorry?
Also number 2, please.
Number 2?
Yes.
Okay. So I need a motion to reflect pulling items 2 and 4.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries unanimously. Item number 2, Mr. Lyons.
Discussion, consideration, possible action of adopting a policy regarding naming and renaming public parks, park areas, and park facilities owned and operated by the city of Midwest City. Mr. Sullivan is here to answer any questions.
Yes, Honorable Mayor and Council, this was a result of some, actually I'll have to rewind and say many years of being involved in the naming of parks and renaming of parks, and we just have never had as staff any clear direction on what the process should be. We've built a few new facilities in our city over the last few years, and remodeled some facilities. So I think staff felt like it was time to have a policy in place that set out a process to make it very clear and leveled the playing field for what the process is. We, just so you'll know, we didn't reinvent the wheel. We looked at several other cities' policies. Don was able to get a copy of Oklahoma City's policy, and we had 2 or 3 others in the state that we looked at. I was quite surprised to find that it's very common that councils and city staff have a policy that puts a process in place like this, and I'll entertain any questions.
So did we kind of take a template policy or a policy that exists within another municipality and tweak it a bit, or is it exactly precisely as was borrowed?
That is
from another
exactly
area?
correct, Ms. Banna. We did exactly that. Most of the language you see here is based off of Oklahoma City's policy. Their processes were a little different as far as their park board and their council and the way they operate. So Don and I worked together to modify them and tweak them to match our situation. But yes, you are correct.
One question I have, I know there was an incredible young advocate here who a few months ago worked through the bureaucracy of this city, I believe her hopes were to change the name of
Yes,
the
ma'am.
park. And you were able to accommodate
Yes,
her
ma'am.
and negotiate a different situation. This policy wouldn't prohibit
No, it would not.
another situation like that?
No, it would not. Matter of fact, it would have assisted us in getting that to a successful closure. I think it would have made the process smoother, much more smooth. Did I say that right? Smooth?
I think the only language that I saw that I guess I'm not a huge fan of is Part E, where it says an individual or organization that contributed significantly to the acquisition and development of the park area, or park facility to be named. This includes deed or substantial monetary contribution or contributions towards acquisition and or development of the park area, park facility, typically not less than 50% of the value of the property improvements. And I respect that this was borrowed, and I recognize everyone, if anyone else has any input on it. I just don't like the idea of creating this balance where folks who have a higher economic power have so much influence, per se, than a young student who maybe is starting out in their first job. I'd like to see how we can equalize and make it more equitable, so every person has, a fair process versus folks who walk in with money. And we appreciate their investment, obviously, but just to make it more of a fair playing ground. I think that was the only piece of the policy that I just wanted to bring to your attention.
But sometimes people do things out of a personal need to be recognized. And if we say to people, no, we're not going to take your $100,000 and name a park after you, or you can't donate this land, we might be blocking ourselves off from pretty good parks. Regardless of the intent of the giver, that's for them to decide. But if somebody comes in and has a piece of land, or they want to give $150,000, yeah, it's maybe not the most equitable thing, but that allows the greater good of the city of Midwest City and residents to be able to use parks that otherwise might not have been created without that person's, regardless if it was a generous gift or regardless if it was self-serving, it still can be used for the good of everybody in the city of Midwest City.
No, and I recognize that, and I wouldn't want to put any barriers or obstacles in anyone who wants to make that large of a contribution and going through the process in an equitable and equal way, and going through the board committee. I just think the language that creates that privilege or that right, if you will, or that sense of ownership is we are taking it upon ourselves to put it on paper and say you will have a right if you give over 50% or more to totally possibly influence the naming of the park.
But that's still not a bad thing. We have a fire station that was built because somebody gave land to the city for a tax write-off.
I understand. I just don't want to make our city's not for sale, right?
Well, I don't think that's what this is saying either. Specifically, I mean, if I want to give the land off of Adair Boulevard that my family owns, it's 3 acres. We don't have anything on it. And if I want to give that for a park, and I say, look, I'm going to give this to a park, but you're going to name it. I would never do this because I don't like things named after me. You're going to name it Sean Reed Park. To say no to that or not encourage that, to me, I think is a detriment to the city and the greater good of people who need green spaces.
I appreciate that, and with that said, I will move to approve it. I just wanted to articulate my concerns in regards to that, and I want to really express my appreciation and gratitude to the taxpayers of the city of Midwest City who not only invest in us building great green space, but also maintaining those parks in the long run, and also taking care of the public safety factor of it. So that is brought to us by the taxpayers of the city of Midwest City and those who endeavor into our city and spend their sales taxes here. So with that said, I move to approve.
Aye.
Aye.
Item number 4. Ms. Eads, you have the floor.
Oh, let me read the item real quick. Discussion, consideration, possible action of 1, approval of and entering into the Home Investment Partnership Program, Grant Contract 2022, Home 1711, between the City of Midwest City and the Oklahoma Housing Finance Agency in the amount of $200,000 for down payment and closing assistance in Midwest City, and agreeing to provide $50,000 in bank matching funds, and 2, authorizing the mayor, city manager, and/or his designee to enter into the necessary contracts and certifications to implement the grant program. Ms. Graff.
Honorable Mayor and Council, this represents our contract with the Oklahoma Housing Finance Agency for the continuation of our homebuyer assistance program. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I was pulling it, I wanted to pull it as well. She said 95% of what I was going to say, but the other is, this is one of those things when we're doing something like this, I think we could put on the discussion agenda, because this is something I think people need to know about. And things get lost in the consent agenda, but something that we're going to put out $250,000 and we can help people buy homes. I mean, it's up to $7,500 for closing costs and down payment assistance. This is a big deal for some people. And these are the kind of things that I think need to be recognized. That's the only reason I wanted to point. Thank you for the job that you've done.
Thank you. Before you go, I also had this item down, and I want to applaud and extend my gratitude as well, because it is, this program, when I first came across it through the Neighborhood Association, I was ecstatic about it because it, again, helps first-time home buyers with that initial investment. I just wanted to know, if, off the top of your head, if you knew how many residents may have applied for this program last year and how many may have actually qualified for it.
The program has actually slowed quite a bit because of the market, but I would say about 20. Generally, we have a few that don't make it through the process, but it's generally not our process. It's the underwriting for the actual mortgage that they don't make it through.
And then one other question that I've had, and because I actually started spreading the flyer when, and I forget her name, the wonderful lady at the Neighborhood Association that handed me this, I started handing them out throughout the community. And I don't know, and I tried to read through the contract, whether the income that is kind of part of the criteria, Ms. Kelton, yes, thank you, sir. If that income criteria that you need to meet to be able to qualify, does the city have the ability to look at that amount and see with inflation whether we can change that qualification amount, or is that dictated through the state? Okay.
It's dictated through HUD.
Yeah, and I think, is it like 50,000, right? Or
Well, for a household of 4, it wouldn't be less than 65.5. That's what the current number is.
okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries unanimously. We move into the discussion items of our agenda. Discussion item number 1, Mr.
PC 2132, public hearing with discussion, consideration, and possible action or approval of the final plat of the curve described as part of the southwest quarter on Section 8, Township 11 North, Range 1 West of Indian Meridian, Midwest City, Oklahoma, located at 11004 Southeast 28th Street. Mr. Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Lyon. This is a request to subdivide single parcels into individual parcels to individual families to single developments and two-family roads will be 19 two-family residents and 1 single-family residence and 1 single-family preliminary 2006 all public improvements required, all public improvement areas and major construction services, market construction services, appropriate parks and appropriate engineering parks and satisfy. These models, city subdivision regulations, require the verbiage to reflect on verbiage to reflect updated and submitted by the applicant to include the applicant tractor toll, associates were present, and their associates were present, surrounding West concerns of West concerns to release points causing erosion, not being a stockade fence on Westminster, stockade fence on sidewalks and trails on 28th Street, and the lower part of Southeast 28th Street. the old part of the South Street Street was surrounding property. Staff found no documentation. Staff found no documentation. Stocking fits around the colors. Six and almost such as should be erected on the property adjacent to Westminster. It's also noted that the walls should be made. It's also material walls should be durable material requirements and durable. City engineer will not sell this property. City engineer will not sell the property. To say that there are no signs of erosion or no sign of erosion will be repaired against the upcoming board package. The upcoming attached to this packet are photos for the attached to this packet are photos for the city engineer to the property. Staff will continue to monitor those sidewalks and trails and trails and trail master planning commission actions at the discretion of the council. We'd be glad to answer any questions.
Anyone have any questions? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing. If anyone has any issues with this hearing,
Billy, you said that staff went out and looked at the erosion, or?
They went out by the stormwater, and they can, this process, they'll start building houses, single families, condos, and they'll keep an eye on.
Okay. Thank you.
Since the fence apparently was an issue with the people that are out there already, and they're going to be required to put a fence up, is that going to be individual property responsibility, or will it be a homeowners association?
We'll get with the owner on that. We'll get with the owner on that because it's not a public community. We'll get to make sure that's installed. Developer on that to make sure that that's installed.
Property, the house that the person that buys the property or the homeowner.
So these, and our expand on that, some of the verbiage that's on the is about maintenance, long-term maintenance, and that should this ever be sold off, this parcel sold off, that HOA should be, they do not plan on selling, so the fence will be installed and will be taken care of by the developer. Taken care of by the developer.
Mr. Harless, you probably don't have this information, maybe you don't have it, but I did get a call and a concern about 28th Street, where it is in the queue, where it is from the GO line. Do you have any idea?
I know that's in a few months, but I don't know exactly when they mentioned that. I just don't recall when. They mentioned that. I just don't recall when it's going to happen. It's coming up. Brandon.
I can address that. The asphalt phase 4 is going out to bid in the next month or so, and then it'll come before you for award, probably the February meeting or the March meeting.
Awesome, thank you. Any further questions, Mr. Carlos? Any further questions, Mr. Carlos? Chair, do you entertain a motion?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Item number 2, Mr. Moore.
PC 2133, discussion, consideration, and possible action to approve an ordinance to redistrict from a planned unit development governed by C4 General Commercial District to PUD governed by I-1 Light Industrial District for the property described as part of the northeast quarter, Section 11, Township 11, Range 2 west of Indian Meridian, Oklahoma County, located at 2113 South Davis Boulevard.
Yes, thanks again, Mr. Martin. Applicants requesting the rezone from PUD planning development governed by C4 General Commercial District. C4 General Commercial District governed by I-1 Light marijuana processor grower. The existing building will be remodeled. The applicant must meet the high street extraction. The location is currently zoned for dispensary is currently zoned for dispensary. Questions of the air quality concerns or questions of staff quality concerns or filtration processes, regarding filtration processes, hazardous gas contaminants. Staff has received one email. Staff has received in opposition to the attached to this report. The applicant was present at the planning commission and gave detailed information on the processing on the processing facility and addressed the gas facility concerns. Planning commission recommended approval. Planning commission recommended approval of the discretion of council. Discretion of council to just highlight that the I-1 highlight the only use that would be allowed. The only use that would be allowed in that would be processing the processing additionals. Industrial additional.
Sold the property.
Industrial
It would
additional.
still be I-1.
Yes, sir.
Somebody else could come in there and do
Yes, sir.
something different, correct?
Yes, sir. They would be allowed to get some of the process. They would be allowed to do the processing on the full acre site, on the I-1, the full acre site, on the I-1, the full
That's
acre
the only
site.
thing that they could possibly do with the I-1.
Yes, sir.
But even if they sold the property
Yes,
to
sir.
somebody else, the zoning stays with the property.
Yes, sir.
Somebody else couldn't come in there and
Yes,
change
sir.
what they're doing.
Well, they could come in and ask for the come in and ask for the PUD, but under the PUD, they won't be allowed to do industrial PUD, it is the industrial hydrocarbon, processing of the grow, and then also the grow, and then also the sale.
Any other questions, Mr. Carls? Any other questions, Mr. Carls? Applicant is here. Will the applicant come to the podium? State your name and address.
Hello, I'm Tom Strayhorn. I live at 1301 Pine Ridge Road here in Old City. We have any questions or?
You have any questions, Mr. Stringer?
Well, I'm going to tell you, a lot of it is way above my pay grade. You know, I've had my landscape business here in Midwest City for, in January, it's been 45 years since my brother Don and I started our business. A lot of the property around us I have sold to different individuals who are now friends. I've had the utmost concern about the odor that anything may cause or if it be offensive to anyone. And there is no way, with all the research that we've done, we have found that that's not the case. To really answer the technical questions that you may have, Jonathan Strayhorn, my nephew, is a coach specialist, and if you would allow him, he'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
My name is Jonathan Strayhorn. Address is 1642 Southeast Queensborough Street. So I would like to answer any questions you guys have, any concerns, any questions you guys have, any concerns. Yes, sir. So I feel like you could say if there's any increase on, any type of building increase on if it's actually built correctly. So, okay, I'm talking about this one. Okay. No, not with the safety items that are put in place. No.
But safety items sometimes fail.
Huh?
We have a history in this world of things that are built to perfect specifications and something inside of it fails.
Yeah.
If something fails, there's a huge increased risk of explosion, I would assume.
There is a increase in fire and explosion, but we could say that same thing about, let's say you're cooking french fries at Arby's and the hood stops on. We say the same thing about that as well.
But we're not talking about Arby's.
No, sir. No, sir, not at all. I actually was told about listed out the state. I work for I actually contracted out to the state fire marshal, Oklahoma State Fire Marshal. And I'm utilized by the Oklahoma Gas Administration of the state of Oklahoma to make sure these are in code compliance throughout the state of Oklahoma. So I can guarantee you that this facility right here will not just meet the minimum code requirements, but it will exceed these code requirements.
One of the things that concerns me the most is your uncle said that you're, and I guess you were involved in preparing this report. It's called Hazardous Area Design, correct?
Yes, sir.
Well, the council knows this and the staff knows it. I go through line by line. And when I went through line by line, there were several places in here that we don't generally see a hazardous area design plan when we're trying to rezone something. So that was the first bill. And then as I'm reading through it, on page 3 it says ventilation blowers shall be of an approved explosion-proof design. Okay, so obviously if it has to be explosion-proof design, there's the threat of explosion. Since it's got to be there, the only reason that would be in there is because there's a possibility an explosion can occur. Because you wouldn't have it in there if it...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, the second thing I saw is that skip that one. Talks about hazardous material analysis on page 6. We start talking about butane, flammable liquids, and that concerned me. And then it talks on another page, it talks about butane and propane both being flammable liquid gases. And, I mean, this is your product that you peer review. And then we get to, and like I said, I noticed that you were the peer reviewer on it, so obviously you read it. You may not have wrote it, but you read it. And then it goes on to another place in there where this hazardous room design is not a paint room. Now, you talked about Arby's, French fries. I don't know if Arby's has a hazardous room design in their facility.
You are correct.
So that's, when I see things like this, and then it talks about the recommended airflow from this hazardous area, that's the thing that concerns me the most. I realize your uncle's been in business for 40 years. He's probably a long-standing business person. The issue I've got is that throughout this report, there's numerous places where it talks about hazardous materials, and then right across the street from this place that talks about hazardous materials, there's a daycare. Okay. North of you, hold on just a second, okay? Just north of you is the dental school. Then there's the salon, that's just north of you. And then the old S&B burgers, that's going to be developed. We hope that doesn't sit vacant. And then just north of there is a high-rise apartment complex that's going to have at least 100 apartments. And then directly south of you is a strip. Across the street, like I said, is a daycare. I mean, directly across the street. And then there's a strip mall, another strip mall, a couple of banks. And my concern is, and I'll be real honest with you, I don't like saying no to somebody that wants to spend money in Midwest City, but the issue I've got is I've got to be able to look myself in the mirror when I vote yes or no, and I'm only one vote, but I don't know how I can get there to say this is something that we need in Midwest City when there's all these documents that you did a peer review on, and there's these words about hazardous, explosive, flammable, when we've got these businesses, and probably the biggest resource that we've got in Midwest City are children directly across the street. And that scares me to death.
And I understand that. Definitely understand the concerns. I'm going to kind of go over how this actually
Can you speak up a little bit?
Okay. Yes, sir. Yeah, no worries. So I definitely understand the concerns. And so I'm kind of explain just a little bit more about this and explain the actual quantity of propane and what we're going to actually have in there. So this will be located inside a C1 booth. The reason of that is we want to make sure these flammable vapors don't escape this. Now, saying this, the LP Gas Administration only allows a 100-pound bottle of propane in there. So I'm just going to kind of give you, it's about this tall. It's what you have usually at, say, a camper site. So if you go to like probably your RV site, there's probably what's sitting outside there, probably leaning over the car. So on top of that, so it's not like a huge amount of propane. So I've actually worked some investigations on fires and explosions. I can tell you right now, it's not going to be crossing Douglas Boulevard. It's not, depending on how close these neighbors are, I would have to really get onto that and really look at it. But I can tell you right now, it's not going to be it's not going to be a huge explosion, right? So, because there's a limited amount of propane inside it. But let's go over the actual extraction process. This is a closed loop process, extraction process. So what does that mean? We don't want any vapors to escape from it. Because if the vapors are escaping, that means we are going to have to spend more money to replace the butane, because we want to recover that butane so that it can be reused again. So we want to make sure that this does not escape that. So that would not be cost efficient if it does that. So saying that, really all these other items are in there just because they're just a safety item for the employees in there, just really mostly your employees around it. So I wouldn't look at this and say, hey, we're going to have a huge explosion. No, that would not be the case. I mean, yes, if something bad did happen here, yeah, you could have an explosion. Okay, yep. So what that's meaning is you have to recalibrate these, like I said, but it's not going to be by a large amount of gas. So you have your gas detector that's going to be close from the ground, and so they want to make sure that it's actually detecting the correct amount of flammable vapors. So the way this is done, it's not going to be by this big tank over here. It's just like as a fire department would test their 4 gas detectors every week or every month, depending on what it is. We would go over there with a small bottle with the same chemicals that would be utilized in propane, and that's what we're testing that propane. So. Well, you could have, you could have anything, but it's not going to be a large amount. It's not going to be a large amount of propane used to test those detectors at all. Yeah, the reason is actually so is to protect the people inside, because now it's going to release the pressure outside instead of maintaining it in there. So that you are correct. You have to put windows in there to release the pressure outside, and so it hopefully helps out with the safety of the personnel inside. Definitely understand the odors too, because I was actually really big, and I put a deal in when I used to work for the city of Del Reno to make sure we didn't have odors that came out of these types of industrial facilities. So saying that this is what we're going for right now is the extracting side, right? Where the odor actually comes from is actually growth facilities. This is not what we're asking for right now is the extraction side. So what ends up happening is this flower will be grown. Depending on where it's going to be grown at, it'll be brought here and be put into a freezer at that point. So you're not going to have any odors going on. And then it's in a closed loop system. So this type of extraction system, the odor is not going to be there. The odor comes off of the actual flower or bud from the cannabis. I've worked on it throughout the state of Oklahoma. Okay. El Reno, actually, I don't even think they have one now. So, in the city of Tulsa, I just have the only one is right down in Tulsa, off the 12th Street. So I got two facilities right down there. In Tulsa, well, we got approved through all their stuff, and they're doing construction right now. So it's already been approved through all the zoning. It's not functioning, but it's all been approved, yes. So, and I would like to tell you guys about this. This extraction is not a new process. They started this a long time ago with vanilla beans, right? That's how we get vanilla bean extract. Also, I mean, we all like essential oils or some of those. Same type of deal here. So I want to make sure that we know that this is not like just a cannabis deal. Now this one will, but this is a common process for extracting any type of material from it.
And I don't disagree with that, but, you know, the report that you peer reviewed on was very comprehensive. And it laid out the dangers. And it was very clear to me that no matter, and no one wants the worst case scenario to happen, but it's very clear from a report that you reviewed and signed off on that there's dangers for this. And I just can't get past not the process, not what you're doing, but is a safety issue of where it's located. I just can't get past it.
I have a couple of questions. You may. You have the gavel. I'm afraid you'll hit me with this, so go first.
Two questions, and I could have missed it. I think, quite honestly, I should have sent concern, quite honestly, I should have burned these things. But how much propane and butane will be stored on this facility?
You're going to have 100 pounds. So, again, 100 pounds of propane is only allowed by LP Gas Administration. So that's what you're going to end up having there. So if you guys go out to any of your RV parks, it's going to be 50 to 100 pounds tank that's going to be out there at the RV park, and you're probably going to have 100. And they're probably going to be leaning in. So this is going to be a much safer environment.
So just one container, just one container all the way in the facility.
That's all that can be in there is by state law inside that facility.
And the 100-pound containers, similar to the one that the guys are doing, plumbing jobs and things of that nature.
Yeah, that's exactly like say you got to construction
About
site.
4 foot or 5 foot high.
Yes, sir.
And it makes propane and propane, are they utilized in the same method, or would they be utilized in the same process? Or?
It's in the same process. It just depends on some people use propane, some people run butane.
So it's the operator's choice?
Yes, they have the same type of chemical properties. Now, I'm not a chemical engineer, but the reason why you got a really nice report there is because not everybody has this, but I just have the connections to where we have a mechanical engineer, started at NASA at 16, we have a chemical engineer as well. That's all that is. I'm sorry. Yes. Yes. Gotcha. So, and I'm usually not quiet. Yeah, it is butane and propane or butane. Yes, sir, and it could be a mixture, but they're really similar chemical properties.
I defer the rest of my time to the
So, Christopher Izell was hired to do this for your uncle's place, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So I've known the Strayhans, Don and Linda, my whole life. Went to church with them. And this is going to sound like I'm being mean, I promise you. One of the things that we try to always make sure we don't have are conflicts of interest or perceived conflicts of interest. And the nephew of the guy that's wanting to build this is the one that's peer reviewing it. Seems to be maybe not really a conflict of interest, but it could very well be a perceived conflict of interest. There's no arm's length between you and your uncle.
Okay, but I'm not doing the
But you peer
acceptance on
reviewed it,
this.
you said everything's fine, right?
Yes, but you have somebody that's doing the engineering. And then
No, it is.
No, because you're comparing a residential business.
No, I'm looking at a perceived conflict of
And ethical
interest.
norms that this body itself hasn't been able to prove itself.
What this body itself does, because when people get to vote, when it's their family member, what they step in the way. All I'm saying,
Okay, let's stay with
I'm not saying that there's a conflict of interest. What I'm saying is there very well could be a perceived conflict of interest. And again, I've known your family my whole life, and I just honestly think you're some of the best people here. It's just there's not an arm's length from this, and it bothers me a little bit for that.
Well, let's say if this happened, would you like somebody else to review it? Actually, so a peer review is not even required on this. It's submitting a technical report that's by an approved professional designer. I just did this because I've started all the reviews for the Home State Fire Marshal's office, and I've built that office for the marijuana and cannabis industry, and then I am the technical assistant. Sorry, I didn't. But I am yeah, I did. But I did do the technical assistance for the LP Gas Administration, who has the biggest, I say, handle on this throughout the state. So I thought that would look better because I I'm your guy in the state. So,
Does anyone have any other questions?
Just stated, you did not have to disclose all that education at first. I want to thank you for educating us. I know when the medical marijuana industry was new in the state of Oklahoma, it was individuals like you who actually educated the director of OBN, because there's so much of this we just don't understand.
Yes.
Right? So thanks for that information. But you didn't have to disclose some of this information. You opted to do so. The law didn't require you to have that information application.
that is 100% right.
And the planning commission did recommend to approve this proposed rezoning.
Yes.
I also wanted to ask also, I know there was some suggestion that we want to balance the best hopes of an incoming business as well as consider possible concerns, right, worst case scenarios. But if we were to do that, for example, the suggestion that, well, you're too close to a residential area, right? There are a lot of, for example, different types of establishments that sit back and overanalyze what we can thinking. For example, putting a bar in a certain location could hurt drunk drivers and then end up hitting a child or a pedestrian. So I don't want to go down that route now when it comes to opening new businesses. And you said you've been doing this for quite a while now. Out of all these different facilities that you were able to establish and get going, how many of them have shot on fireworks?
Zero. Zero marks.
Are we aware of any other such facility that exists in the city of Midwest City?
No, no ma'am.
Do you know what the expected sales tax that this business made for this municipality?
From that facility, so depending on if you've got an extraction type of facility and then you got dispensary. So it could, yes, it would be going from, some of that's going to be going from there to the dispensary. And I don't want to lie about that, so
I had one more question, and now I lost my train of thought. But again, thank you for being here, and I'd like to move to approve this item, unless there's any opposition to it. And I thank you for being patient with us, Nancy.
thank you.
I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second? Motion on the floor. Do I have a second? Motion fails due to lack of second. I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. I have a motion to disapprove, and I have a second. All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Opposed?
Nay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
At this moment in time, you do have to take a roll call vote because you do not have a unanimous vote one way or the other. So that would require a roll call vote. That would require a roll call vote.
Stand corrected, please conduct a stand call.
Ward 1,
We're voting on this one.
disapproving. Ward 2, Ward 3, Ward 4, Ward 5,
No.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes. Motion passes to disapprove the zoning request. Thank you, Mr. Strayhorn, for being here. It's been an educational process. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us and we're going down the road. Thank you. Appreciate that. Ladies and gentlemen, item number 3 is a request that we get to table this. Motion to table. Item number 3. Table. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstention, motion carries. It's hereby tabled. Item number 4, Mr. Warren.
Discussion and consideration of possible action is 1, accepting and 2, adopting the Air Depot corridor plan by Catalyst Commercial. This is Robert Coleman and Lee Harless.
In 2019, we were asked to pursue a Board of Grantors application for funding for a study that would examine the the Air Depot corridor from Silver Meadow Drive south to Southeast 15th Street, about 1.5 miles. We had a number of vacant buildings in that area, plus there was just some aesthetic problems, and we also had some traffic safety concerns. It certainly wasn't a pedestrian-friendly area. So we spoke to Catalyst Commercial out of Dallas, Texas. If that name sounds familiar, it's because they did the Heritage Park Mall redevelopment scenarios, which was approved and accepted by City Council in March of 2017. And tonight we have with us Mr. Jason Claunch from Catalyst Commercial. He's been involved in several redevelopment projects. He did a great job with the plan that we presented in 2017, and we think that you'll find this one just as appealing.
Hey, Billy, will you work with the microphone too? Because apparently the people in the audience can hear it, but ours is not as clear.
Test, test. Test, test.
I'm just saying that there's
An operator back there.
this presentation is not pull up.
First, before we start, Robert, I appreciate you working with a contractor to do this. This has been a work in progress for a couple of years, and our staff has spent, Robert kind of blew through it, but he spent a considerable amount of time with the business owners, the residents, the chamber, to get this product. And it's a result of the fact that it doesn't take much driving down the main corridor of Minnesota to see we have a bunch of vacant buildings. And vacant buildings lower the tax rate. So we're sales tax, so we needed, Robert was asked to get the grant, which he did, and he worked with Catalyst, but this was a long process. This wasn't done overnight. There was some workshops that were done with the property owners, and some of the chamber, and some of the residents, because I know some people from my ward were involved in it. It used to be mine, now it's yours. But this is an extremely good product, and I've had the opportunity to look at a couple of drafts that was cleaned up, because you can take any place in Midwest City, 10th Street, 23rd Street, 15th Street, and plug that in. And it may not, the demographics may not be the same, but the theory and the practice is the same. So this is just for Air Depot, but we're going to be able to take what product they put together and probably use it throughout the city, if I'm not correct, Robert. And it's a result of Robert's work, working with the contractor, that we're at this product now.
Well, I'd be remiss not to point out all of the assistance from the planning department, and especially Billy Harless and Petra Stefanoff on this project.
A lot of work, a lot of time. It was 2 or 3 workshops and meetings, and this has been going on for a while. And like I said, we need to do something to promote the businesses. And like I said, anybody in any ward can take this and apply it in their ward.
Thank you, Councilman Byrne. Mayor, Manager, Council, I echo, this was a great project that we initiated on behalf of staff. I'm going to try to wing a presentation that you can't see, but I'll give you some highlights. Unless, are you guys seeing the presentation from P&T on here? Okay. So let me begin. This corridor, like a number of corridors across the United States, somewhat unique and nuanced. So we spent a lot of time looking at the existing character, so that's the slide that we're starting on, and really distributed and broke the analysis up into 3 different segments, purely based on character and the corridor and the age. And so obviously the first area was really Reno North, creatively named that the North Corridor. But again, larger lots, a lot of institutional uses. Obviously, we worked on the mall back in the day, and staying tuned. I think there's 3 solid options that we recommended for the mall that we anticipate getting plugged into this initiative. So we didn't look at it, this is a separate study in and of itself. The three scenarios, I think, for the mall are still very much applicable. The central area of the core is the area between Reno and really the railroad. That area substantially has auto-oriented retail. The uniqueness of this corridor is it doesn't have any medians, and obviously the pedestrian safety and some of the conflicts with signage is difficult and challenging for both, I think, people that are traveling that corridor, which we realized through the conversation just for throughput, but a lot of the uses there creates a destination, but the traffic issues and safety are challenged. And then really the southern area, which is at the end of the corridor, which is kind of 15th Street up to the old railroad crossings. That has a mix of neighborhood retail and obviously the character of that changes. On the west side, it gets fairly shallow. On the east side, it's somewhat of a pattern that we see throughout the core. So some of the general observations, what we call kind of the technical observations. Some of the constraints, there's a lot of infrastructure, overhead infrastructure that services an area beyond this that creates some conflicts when you think about redevelopment, revitalization. The medians create a challenge. Both they function as a pedestrian refuge, but they also help to control traffic and make that area more predictable. We certainly don't necessarily think that you need to adopt a full complete streets program, although we did work with Kinley Horn on this, and they're well versed in the complete street program, but we've noted a number of just pedestrian safety and issues crossing the street, a lot at the school, places that would be natural for ad hoc signals or just better crossing and signals. And then, again, nothing specific to the corridor, but there's a substantial amount of light and just functional obsolescence of buildings that are lasted longer than they were intended to last, and you can only put Band-Aids and improve those so much. And I know you've got programs to address some of that, but obviously those are some of the initial observations. And then we did a number of conversations and community conversations and workshops, really wanting to make sure that we understood this from your perspective. And so Robert and his team were instrumental in hosting a number of feedback and conversations adjacent to that. And so in terms of the feedback, we've got obviously a strong desire for some new upgraded buildings, some entertainment options and things that might be more family oriented. And I would call that sort of just better convenience in places that would create engagement. The note also was that this is an area that's functional. We're not going to change the right-of-way or do a road diet. This is a very important roadway. The truck traffic and some of the throughput needs to be accommodated, so we don't want to choke that down. But there are also the city and citizens recognizes some traffic safety issues and clutter from signage and just some of the lighting issues at night, and then the need for beautification. So I'm going to flip through and talk a little bit about why this is important. We've done a number of studies specific to just neighborhoods and residential vitality and health. And it's interesting, the number one factor attributing to neighborhood health and decline is the character and the quality of the corridor. Makes sense. If the streetscape and the commercial retail is run down and paving and signage and all the things that you see along our neighborhood, definitely affects the marketability of the neighborhoods. And as you study that, we didn't do that for this initiative, but that has an impact, over 1,500 feet deep into the neighborhood. And so when you think about neighborhood decay and issues affecting neighborhood stability, we want to recognize that improving a corridor could also substantially have an impact on your neighborhood health and ad valorem values. And then also there's a lack of connectivity between the commercial corridor and those neighborhoods, but we would love to see that improved if there was a reason for those connections to occur naturally. We talked a little bit about the safety of crossing the neighborhood itself, but think about the opportunities just of creating better community neighborhood connections and paths within that. There was some discussion, which I think is a big idea. As we explored it, it was a little bit more challenging to pull off, but there's places like Carmel, Indiana that have trail-oriented development, and if you've got that old railroad bed that certainly could function and is planned to be a regional trail, perhaps extending that behind some of the commercial uses, and actually having the businesses have dual-facing uses, and maybe some restaurants and destination restaurants and patios facing the trail. So anyway, some interesting things came out of that. But one of the things that we noticed is just the changing demographics and dynamics of the neighborhood. There's lower and lower amounts of owner-occupied residents in the neighborhood adjacent to the corridor. And again, I think just improving the corridor would improve some of the stability and the desire and the livability for that. In addition, we did study the retail rents and put that into context of the region. The vacancy is actually fairly low, but what we've noticed is that what's happening is a lot of these businesses in the corridor that are contributing to some of the blight and decline is that you're in this do loop. The vacancy is low, but the rent's also low, and that's generally a function of performance. The higher performing tenants can afford to pay more rent. That might require more capitalization for that to occur, but what we're seeing is that there's more discount tenants moving in because of the lower rents, which attracts more discount tenants. And so while the vacancy is low, the performance is also low, and so that's something that we certainly would want to underscore and benchmark. And then you get into all the mobility issues, so the design, the lack of the median, the high speeds and volumes in terms of pedestrian traffic. There are places where there's sidewalks, but those aren't continuous, and so trying to walk from one end of the corridor to the other, or even crossing the corridor. And then comments in terms of non-pedestrian activity, cycling and those things probably is not preferred. There's just not a safe environment. There's really no preferred paths for that, at least on street. So we did recommend and notice that a lot of folks are interested in non-auto oriented opportunities, but I think the Air Depot corridor would probably be limited to the trails, or we'd need to increase and improve the sidewalks and the width of those through some of the redevelopment or revitalization. So as we got through this, we did create kind of a vision or vision statement, but essentially the Air Depot corridor will be a destination for Midwest City. It once was, back in the day. That's where it began. And it really functions for residents and visitors, businesses that have a sense of place. It's safe to travel within, and it serves as an amenity to the surrounding neighborhood. So I think really that's a good vision. That's something that we spent some time with a number of workshops that was well received and endorsed. And so in order to do that, we laid out a number of initiatives and priorities that we really broke up into each section. So for the northern corridor, I'm not going to go through all these, but logically, some of the first initiatives would be just gateway improvements, landscaping, aesthetics. Those are major intersections, and that's a public realm environment that you can control. So you don't have to wait for business to turn over. You don't necessarily have to relocate all the overhead electric in order for that to occur, but really just focusing on some of the intersections. And then we did make note that probably just north of the intersection, there's a great spot for mid-block crossing to start to introduce the opportunity for safer connectivity. This doesn't require, full rebuild of the street, but again, I think that's the first initiative. Some of the things that we recommended that I think need to be explored just financially and with maybe your engineering department and obviously some of the electric utilities would be either relocating, which I think is probably the logical solution for some of the overhead, is just relocating it behind some of the commercial. And so that sort of gets it out of the right of way and would remove it. We've been extremely successful where that, burying it and putting it in a duck banks is probably cost prohibitive with the amount of infrastructure and utilities within the overhead, and a lot of the utility companies don't like to have the utilities underground for maintenance purposes. But I think studying where that could be relocated over time and then applying some financial participation to that as the redevelopment occurs would make sense. Within the core, we talked about enhancing those streetscape improvements, again, finding opportunities to connect the sidewalks, improving the east-west connections. I think 5th Street would be another location for an obvious improvement to the intersection there. And then I think the whole trail system within the old rail right-of-way completely makes sense when you think about its location, the position, and its connection up to Reno, which basically can pull back to the mall. We showed that back in the day before the regional trail system was adopted, so that you've got this sort of full circular trail and can connect the neighborhoods as a no-brainer. And then again, continuation of some of the infrastructure overhead improvements that we talked about. And then the south, again, Askew and 15th would be all, intersections to improve. And then certainly at 15th, another what I would call significant or more major improvement on the intersection with landscaping and really just functioning as a gateway or an entryway to the corridor. All of which we've made some recommendations to address zoning. Our recommendation would be to look at some sort of character-based or form-based zoning that might be a little bit foreign and aggressive, but at least some sort of character overlay or standards that could be applied specifically to this district. I think that's critical to encourage the redevelopment and the appropriate block pattern, and really start to integrate maybe closing of a few curb cuts as redevelopment and revitalization occurs, or certain triggers such as vacancy may occur. And I think that's one of the notable recommendations. We did propose a couple different streetscapes you'll see in your packet. One of those would be really leaving the building. There's a building setback line that there's sort of a natural rhythm that occurs, maintaining that setback line, but making sure as redevelopment occurs that you don't sort of have steps above and beyond that, and creating some sort of consistency both from an auto cadence and a pedestrian cadence. And then there's another consideration that I think would actually make more sense for redevelopment, where you're sort of moving some of the buildings closer to the street, creating better activation, and then moving some of the parking and increasing landscaping. And in both scenarios, we did increase some of the landscaping realm a little bit, because there's really just a very small fingered landscape, and it's almost so narrow that it's not capable of holding mature plantings just because of the heat island effect that you would get. So in terms of recommendations from an economic development standpoint, would love to work with Robert and your team in some incentives that make sense, that are appropriate, that would be performance-based, that could be applied specifically as an incentive for the corridor. Again, and I do agree with you. I think some of these policies you could replicate in other parts of the community. Certainly a marketing and branding strategy, and then ultimately recruiting specific tenants. I think in order for the redevelopment revitalization to occur, we've got to put a focus on this with very specific tenants that can help kind of reverse that do loop that we talked about, the vicious cycle, and create the virtuous cycle. And then also mixed use. There's a lot of horizontal uses that are mixed, but most of those are retail and service. There's not a lot of real estate there when you think about the runway, but I would love to see opportunities just to increase some mixed use, and that may just be 2 buildings with some green space with a MU, but mixing it up beyond just service retail. And then ultimately, one of the key points, and we could do this through zoning, but certainly through policy recommendation, is looking for opportunities, not just for convenience, which exists there, but also experience. And I think that's going to be key. And that could be MUs, it could be the type of restaurant or entertainment, but really I think making sure that there's specific initiatives in terms of not only creating opportunities for more convenience retail, but that experience. For mobility and safety, again, we talked about the pedestrian links and working with the Traffic and Safety Commission, looking at some of the complete streets, or at least light programs, and then encourage and reducing some of the signage, at least creating a cohesive pattern along signage. If everybody had monument signage, it'd probably be okay. Everybody's got pole signage currently, but at least creating some consistency and continuity, and removing some of the visual clutter. And I'd also love to see, through the branding approach, some wayfinding and some signage that could guide you and direct you to maybe some of the community elements, and create some sort of sense of place there that would be cohesive. And then in terms of quality, and reducing the blight and the vacancy and some of the issues, just creating a demo rebuild program. I know you've got some funds set aside to help do some of that work, but also partner with some of the underutilized property owners. And it's really sort of a guerrilla approach, but really developing, I know Robert knows most of them personally, but getting a good business plan for some of those underutilized businesses and partnering up with some of the uses that have been recruited that can actually increase the throughput and create a better sense of place. And then naturally, while I think the city overall does a good job in terms of code compliance, this is one that, should be a zero tolerance place within the district if you want the district to occur and really make sure that everybody follows the rules. We recognize that things happen, but as property owners, there's a level of responsibility, and I think certainly when the city steps up and invests, the public investment within this, starting with this study, and hopefully ultimately with public dollars to improve the streetscape and landscape in the public realm, that the private sector should also contribute and do their part. So code compliance is a no-brainer. I think that's low-hanging fruit. And then ultimately, we created design priorities and phased those out, and we can talk about funding and opinion and probable cost associated with those. So in your packet, there's a complete master plan that we've broken all this down and phasing. Happy to answer any questions. I apologize for the audience that there's not visuals, but at least we try to walk you through some of the highlights. So thank you very much.
I have a question for you to save me picking a bad one. I already looked it up, but there's a lot of them out there. Do you know of a city that you're familiar with that was kind of in our predicament that went to that character-based zoning and it's working for them?
Yeah, I would say, I'm trying to think of an Oklahoma, perhaps Mustang. A lot of the character-based zoning, in kind of the technical description, if you wanted to look up, would be form-based code. I'm not suggesting that you need to go that far, but character-based zoning would be sort of form-based code light, and it would certainly help you regulate not just the uses, but sort of the building placement and form and some of the landscaping that we talked about. I think Broken Arrow, New Orleans, and Elm and 101, I think that's a project that we were involved in that has worked in some character-based rezoning. I think would be a good analog. It's not complicated, but in my mind, that would be the first step.
For you, it's a challenge for someone else.
Yeah. City initiated zoning, I think politically is tough, but when you have a vision like this and when you have as much stakeholder involvement and support and you have the same desire for the outcomes, and I would say that I would expect 90-95% of the folks to be on board. And really, you want to encourage people to do the right thing and discourage people from doing the wrong thing, and the regulatory tools there to help that enable that to occur. So I think it would be something that might be foreign locally, more in terms of culture. But if you think about the majority of downtowns today, most of those are adopting some sort of character-based zoning, specifically because they want that walkability and that feel, and the only way to regulate the walkability and feel and some of those design guidelines is through more of a calibrated code. But I wouldn't think about it any more than that. It just has a few more layers to it than what your traditional code has.
If I can, Councilman Byrne, oppose four-base codes. Oppose four-base codes. Four-base codes for the hospital district codes. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The stuff he was describing, the parking out front, is exactly what we're trying to do over there.
Yes, sir.
So that's basically the concept.
Yes, sir. It has not been adopted, but we have drafted, we have redrafted in the next several months.
And if you think about the places that you enjoy going, a lot of those, even if they're planned development or a master plan, the town center, in a way, all that was sort of prescribed. I mean, there was very much of an intent of where the building placement is. In fact, they regulate themselves because there's permissible building areas and where landscaping has to occur. And it's the intent of that is to encourage and regulate where landscaping is and the amount of landscaping and where the building forms can go. Some of it's so that they don't block visibility, but again, developers self-impose that so that they essentially can get the look and the feel and the execution. So it's, again, in the process and the concept is not form. It just may be a different application than what you're used to in maybe the hospital district that you guys are looking at. So,
thank you very much. We appreciate all the hard work. And does anyone have any other questions? That I'd entertain a motion to adopt the study.
The motion, accept the study.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thanks again.
Abstention, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor, Manager. Thank you.
We're hereby recessed for 10 minutes. I'm sorry.
Give him 5 minutes. I can. You want water? Anybody else? I'll go get it.
Thank you.
Pat, you need another Diet Coke?
This, right here.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
No
Did
problem.
everybody get a water that wanted a water? Anybody else?
I need
Mayor
one.
got one? Anybody else want a water? No? Okay. I'm not gonna ask what that is. Come on.
We need to put a refrigerator right over there with water in it. Okay, we move into the remainder of our discussion agenda. Discussion item number 5, Mr. Lyon.
Discussion, consideration, possible action, including any amendments of an update to a resolution declaring the structure or structures located at 1309 Lloyd Drive dilapidated buildings as defined under Midwest City Code 9-2 and abatement accordingly to the municipal code. Mr. Stroh.
Thank you. I've handed out flyers starting over with Ward 1, pictures of the property in its current condition. There's 2 sets there, one for yesterday and one for today, to show you the progress made in just a day. The exterior of the property is, I'd say, 97% complete. I do have talked with the chief building official, and he testified to me that the owner of the property has done everything asked of him. Just when I go by also, he's had dumpsters on property and cleaning, and when I say he's had a crew working, I mean that is not one individual. He's had 3 to 4 people working on the property at all times. So as you can see, it's almost done. Action is your discretion, but my recommendation is just to allow him the time he has on his remodel permit and do away with the resolution.
Would you put a timeline? Would you suggest we put a timeline on that?
His permit has a timeline, and I want to stress that we had him in front of you all on October 25th. His 60-day resolution expired Christmas night. He did apply for his permit on October 17th, and we were in a transition period of no chief building official for the plans review, and so he did not get approval of his remodel permit until December 17th. And so I personally have a problem holding him feet to the fire when it was our delay to get him his permit. He did do work over there as far as removing the burnt debris and cleanup and things of that nature, and he is here if you would like to talk to him.
I'd like to see how much time he thinks he needs. Because he really has done a lot of work.
Hello, Council. Hello, Council.
Name and address is for the record.
Greg Riddles, 8801 Northwestern Avenue in Oklahoma City.
And you're the administrator and overseer of the 1309 Lloyd Drive, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How much more time you need?
Well, we pulled someone off. We pulled, with the delays and everything, with COVID being going on, our architect got sick, and what the first city official told us wasn't accurate. We had to go from an architect to an engineer. So we've had quite a few delays on it. I did pull every one of my available crew members to get the property on, I don't remember the actual dates that he just gave out, but here within the last 3 weeks, at one point in time, we had 13 people working on the property. I've got another unit that is in Midwest, or in Southeast 42nd Street that was burned also, that I am very close, within a week to 10 days of completing, that I've pulled everybody off of. So once I've instructed them to get everything completed from an exterior standpoint, I'm hoping that to be completed by tomorrow. All we have left is siding. They should have finished. I've got a couple of screws. They've got a couple of screws left to go back in and redo in spots on the roof. We wanted to get it on. We did go with metal, which is much better for us from an insurance standpoint. It's also much better for you guys from a look standpoint and durability standpoint. I'm going to say that we have, I oversee this stuff. I'm not the one that's in there with the hammer and nails and doing the diagrams. But with the experience that I have in this, I'm going to say that we have somewhere, as long as permits go through in a timely manner, that we probably have somewhere around 3 months left to work on the property. Once that we complete tomorrow, I will be pulling them off for a week to 10 days to go complete that property on Southeast 42nd, and then they will be back here full-time to get the interior of this
But Mike,
property.
we're not really concerned about the interior. We're concerned about the exterior, not in a blighted state or anything else, correct?
That is absolutely correct, and I did want to stress that. His exterior, he will have done this week.
And the building's totally dried in, I guess, now.
Yes.
I have zero problem with an
I don't
extension.
have any problem. Does
What do you
anybody want
what do you-
to,
So can we
What do you
make
want
this,
from us, Mike?
can we make this to where we give an extension? He doesn't need to come back unless you want him to come back?
He's under a current resolution that expired December 25th. I would like to consider that final and allow him to use his building permit and his building permit dates, and therefore he doesn't have to come back, and I don't need to bring it back to you all.
But you'll still send somebody out just to make sure everything's taken care of?
Yes, he and I have an agreement. He will have the exterior completed
Okay.
before he pulls his crews.
So we need to make a motion to... Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we have title search that we had to do in order for us to bring it in front of y'all. Just the normal mailing.
We didn't send
So-
anybody out to mow the property at any point?
No, sir.
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Mike
Can
will
you-
have to answer that.
Can you put a cost associated with this whole process with this particular piece of property?
Yeah, I just asked the city attorney whether we have grounds to even do that. The title search, I believe I have it in the file. I believe it's 215. But again, would be an attached under an administrative fee if we would have
Mr. City
taken
Attorney,
action.
do we have the actual legal ability to even do that?
Under normal circumstances, that would be accomplished through putting a lien on the property and then that lien being paid off. Doing it, I don't recall any legal authority that the city council has to assess costs in a dilapidation action like this. As I said, the normal process would be to we would end up doing whatever action we needed to take on the property, put a lien on the property, and we would be reimbursed through that mechanism. As I said, the costs are usually handled through putting a lien on the property. I know, and Mike, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe we put a lien on the property yet for any of the activities because we would not do that until after we demolished we completed the process and did it through that mechanism. That's the only mechanism I know of under both our city code and under state law to reimburse us for those costs.
I agree.
With that being said, I'd entertain a motion to release him and come back if need be, as determined by code enforcement.
So I do have a question for future reference. You said that you're not sure you would not release guy out. Can you do research to see if this comes to us in the future? If you have a situation like this, we can review costs and what you
Sure, I can do that. If I'm directed by the city manager to do that. If I'm directed by the city manager to undertake that research, I'd be happy to.
We'll take a look at that.
I've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention, motion carries. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, City Council.
Item number 6, Mr. Lyon.
Discussion and consideration of possible action, including any amendments of an update to a resolution declaring the structure located at 1401 Moore Avenue a dilapidated building or buildings as defined under Midwest City Code 9-2 and abatement accordingly to the municipal code. Mr. Stroh again.
Thank you. Same conditions, property was brought to you on October 25th, expired its resolution on Christmas night. The property, I do have a report from the chief building official that the demo permit was approved on 10/26/22 and issued and picked up by the owner, Mr. Long, on December 20th of 22. With that being said, the sewer cap did not pass inspection until December 19th. So the 20th was the first day he could have legally picked up the permit. After talking with Mr. Fryer, the issue was taking so long to get the demo permit. The owner is here. I've talked to him tonight. They had equipment delivered to the property today to start the demolition process this week. But permit was just picked up December 20th.
So is there any issue for us proceeding on with the demo?
No, other than I would like just to request our original request of 30 days to complete so that we don't have a lag in how long something takes. So
Does anyone have any questions of Mr. Stroh? Chair to entertain a motion to proceed. Can you state your name and address for us?
Aubrey Long, 1205 South Air Depot Boulevard.
And so, you have materials delivered that you're going to prepare to demo this?
There's a track hoe in the front yard right now that that he delivered today to tear it down.
And you expect to have that done in 30 days, Mr. Stroh?
Yeah, he's going to start in the morning. Yeah, he's starting in the morning.
Sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
Acoustics this time. Speak into the mic, your voice goes somewhere.
Not up here.
So, sorry. Okay. That's all the questions I have.
All right, Chair to entertain a motion to proceed and give him 30 days to complete.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Abstention? Nothing. Thank you for being here and thanks for working with us. We appreciate it. Zero times. Item number 7, Mr. Ryan. Item number 7.
Discussion and consideration of possible action on amendments to the city ordinance of the city of Midwest City, chapter 38, subdivision regulations. Mr. Harless.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Ryan. Yes, I'd like to thank Mr. Councilman Murray. This health service is something that staff has noticed for many years for needed attention and attention. His leadership stuff and taking front committee and taking Johnson and Associates with Johnson and Associates, also several other staff members, planning commission, a few builders have participated in going through this ordinance review with the task force. As you may recall, about a year and a half or so, contract or so with Johnson Associates. Johnson Associates, good engineering firm there, but mostly because they work in the Oklahoma City metro area, not only on the city side of things, but also on the developer side. So they have a really small developments happen, and how they have a comparison around the metro area, and the key point with the task force. The goal of this thing was not walk away and say all waivers or not do waivers. The goal was to come up with something that was fair, to come up with something that was fair to the builder, but also to the citizens, because with this waiver process that had been applied, the citizens had to go back in and install the infrastructure and install the infrastructure here. So with that, I'll just close out what Johnson attempted to do a presentation attempt to do a presentation.
Billy, I want to point out, we did have a special council meeting.
Yes, sir. We had a special council meeting. Yes, sir. We had a special council meeting. We went over this almost exactly. So it'll be very familiar with you. So it'll be very familiar. I think the only thing that we just updating the numbers due to the inflation. That'll give it to you.
Thank you, Billy. Mark Zitzow with Johnson & Associates. My address is 1 East Sheridan Avenue in Oklahoma City. Louder? Okay. Is this better? Perfect. Mark Zitzow with Johnson & Associates. Thank you all for taking the time. I want to first thank our steering committee. We had city staff. We did have representation from the development community, as well as Planning Commission and City Council. As Billy mentioned, we've been working on this for about a year and a half now, and so we're excited to get to this point. So hopefully this can be adopted. The presentation obviously is not working. I think, just real quick, was everybody present at the study session in September? Okay, so I'll do the highlight version of this. I do have a wonderful 45-minute presentation for you all, but you have seen it. So the short version, yeah. So Billy gave a really good sum up. I think what was happening prior to our involvement in our study sessions was that the development community was consistently seeking waivers to infrastructure. And that was infrastructure for sidewalks and infrastructure for roadways. In doing so, what was happening was increased development was occurring at a much greater density than the infrastructure could handle. That was leaving you through bond projects or other funding sources to come back and make those improvements. Through this process, what we did was we've tweaked the subdivision regulations to require minor subdivision plats for the subdivision of developments less than 5 acres. What that allows you to do as the council, and ultimately the Planning Commission as well, is to request things like drainage studies, traffic impact analysis, but no waiver could be sought anymore. They would either have to make the improvements, or alternatively, they can pay this fee, which is 70% of the development cost to do so. So I guess, just point you to the PowerPoint that I handed out and go to page 56. These are the proposed fees. It's 56 on the bottom. The PowerPoint was much larger than what I handed out. So these are the proposed fees. Currently, your sidewalk fee in lieu would require 115% of the cost of development. It was determined through this process that that was quite high and maybe a little excessive. So through this, the construction costs for fee in lieu are going to be 70% of what the development costs would be, which brings the sidewalk down to the current rate, which is $18.02 per linear foot. And then the road improvement cost is $104.10 per linear foot. These numbers are slightly higher, and by slightly higher, by cents, since your September meeting based on inflation. The ordinance as written is going to trigger an update every January based on the engineering news record to make sure that the development fees that are going to be paid are keeping in line with inflation. This prevents you from getting into a situation where your impact fees are no longer applicable or are not keeping up with the cost of development. So if you were to flip through, if you go 2 slides, I'll point to one example and then I'll take questions. So this example was at Northeast 7th and Pine. This is 58. Okay, thank you. So this was at Northeast 7th and Pine. This development went through and received waivers, and that prevented any fees from being collected. What that meant was the city lost out on collecting $53,000 for this development project. So when these fees are collected, the benefit area is the entire city of Midwest City. So it'll be up to the discretion of the council to determine where these funds will be utilized in the future. So that could be sidewalk or street improvements in this neighborhood or nearby on an arterial street. So I point to this one for a couple reasons, but the main reason being this street saw a significant amount of subdividing over the last 30 years. And what that meant was there was no fees collected, and there ended up being about 7 new lots created here. In the future, you would have funding to then go back and put in the proper drainage infrastructure, the street infrastructure, and sidewalks in this neighborhood. So with that, I'd be happy to kind of drill into any specific part of the ordinance, but I believe the red line ordinance was included in your packet, and it's been reviewed by staff and the city attorney, and then we would ask for your approval tonight.
As far as the steering committee goes too, there was a member of the planning commission, city staff, myself, and there was actually a builder, a developer on the subcommittee. And there was back and forth discussion for a few meetings on, I'll admit that when I went in there, I was 100% no waivers. Well, that's not realistic. And this is, it took a few meetings for everybody to get on the same page to come up with what is a fair and equitable price for the city and for the developer. In the one example he just touched on, about 7th and Pine, it's really interesting because over there, there's a lot more houses than he mentioned, but there was no infrastructure. And then the people over there started having drainage issues, and they come to the city expecting us to pay it. In fact, myself and Brandon Bundy were over there one day, and with a developer, and his comment was that basically he'd built this house, and it's not a cheap house. It's a very expensive house. Well, I didn't expect the infrastructure that I put in to last this long. So, it kind of puts us in a position where then they're coming to us to fix it. And these citizens don't understand. And the old ordinance basically said if there was a hardship, they could get a waiver. But everybody was getting waivers. And it wasn't based on hardship. It was just based on asking almost. And, Sean, we went round and round about we need to stop this and come up with something that was fair for the city, that wasn't going to curtail development. And I'm not, without calling any names, because I wasn't there to hear it, but I do know that it went through the Planning Commission. It was a unanimous vote, and that there were statements even made in the Planning Commission. There's some builders and developers on the Planning Commission said that they realized that it was time to, even though they didn't necessarily want it because it was going to affect the bottom line on them as a developer, but if they put their citizen and their Midwest City resident hat on, they said this is fair. So, and that's what we were hoping to get to. The ultimate goal was to get to something that we could live with and say this is fair for everybody, and it wasn't going to curtail development. Is that not an accurate statement, Billy?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. They were very supportive. Yes, they were very supportive. Yes, they were very supportive.
Man, they had the best intentions, but we're not paying for that. And this is our ability, I believe, as a council, through a lot of hard work, you guys, everybody, to get rid of some of the sins of our forefathers, so 30 years from now, we don't have a future council saying those idiots in 2023.
What will happen to the possibility? We're going to say it next year. The possibility could exist that we've got places in our town that are getting close to the end of their neighborhoods. At some point, a developer is going to come in there and want to develop, and they'll raise some houses and they'll put in some new streets and new homes. And we need to have something in place that when that happens, that these people understand that they've got to pay for the infrastructure. And the big thing is the drainage studies. I mean, that was the big thing, because we've got so much drainage issues that have never been dealt with in the past. And it's us that started to deal with it. And the list is long on where we have to go fix. And this will give us the ability to do that. And thank you very much for, in Mr. Johnson in the back, the work that you did, because you got us to a point where we could all agree, and I didn't think that would ever happen in our committee meeting, because I was pretty hard on, I'm not budging, and then you got a builder that says, well, I'm not budging either, and we were able to come to what's fair, which is what we should do.
I also think hiring somebody who's going to represent both sides of an issue and isn't considered a homer for one side or the other went a long way.
to approve.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries.
Thanks again. Thanks again. Good job.
Now we move into our new business public discussion. Does anyone in the audience have anything to bring before the council? Hearing or seeing none, we are hereby recessed.
We can adjourn.
We can adjourn. There's
Yes, sir.
nothing else. I correct myself, and we are hereby adjourned, and I call to order the Midwest City Municipal Authority. We have a consent agenda attached to this agenda, and these items are placed on the consent agenda. Trustees, by unanimous consent, can approve routine agenda items by one motion. If any trustee requests to discuss an item or if unanimous consent cannot be received, then the item will be removed and heard in regular order. Chair to entertain a motion to approve. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention, motion carries. We now move into new business public discussion. Does anybody have anything to bring before the authority? Hearing or seeing none, we are hereby adjourned. I'll call to order the Midwest City Hospital Authority. We do have a consent agenda on this agenda as well, and these items are once again placed on the consent agenda. So the trustees, by unanimous consent, can approve routine agenda items by one motion. If any trustee requests to discuss an item or unanimous consent cannot be received, then the item will be removed and heard in regular order. Chair to entertain a motion to approve. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Fourth.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention, motion carries. We do have one discussion item. Mr. Lyon.
No action needed, Mayor.
No action needed on discussion item number one. We move into new
Chairman.
business public discussion. Does anybody have anything to bring before the authority? Hearing or seeing none, we are hereby adjourned.
Recess.
I'm sorry. We are hereby recessed, and we do have an executive session attached to this agenda. Mr. Lyon. No recess and then
Whatever
read.
the city clerk tells me to do. You want me to read it? Or?
You read it when we come back.
All right.
Aye, aye, Captain.
I never know.
Okay, we are hereby recessed and we'll come back. I call to order the Special Economic Development Authority. We have a consent agenda with this agenda, so these items are placed on the consent agenda so the trustees by unanimous consent can approve routine agenda items by one motion. If any trustee requests discussion item or unanimous consent cannot be received, then the item will be removed and heard in regular order. Chair to entertain a motion to approve.
I'm sorry, can I just have two brief questions, and item 2 and 3 are really dealing with the same issue.
Go ahead.
Mr. Coleman, I understand that some of the delay was explained because of the inflation.
We have to pull it off the consent agenda.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, we do.
Thank you.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda, but remove 2 and 3 for discussion.
What you said.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? The motion is as follows. 2 and 3 were removed, 1 was approved. Go ahead, Ms. Banner.
So I understand that the delay or the extra time is being requested because of the inflation as we all are struggling with. And I noticed that in the language it said that they are trying to, I guess, downsize, if you will, the plant. That doesn't impact the number of employers we had hoped to, employees that we had hoped to be able to hire at the facility, right?
Until we see the actual building plan, I can't tell you that, and they haven't even got an estimate on how that will be affected. I think most of the downsize will be in cold storage and not in the actual production area. But if you want to delay approval on this till we have those numbers, we can do that.
I don't want to delay it. I'm ecstatic about having this new business come into Ward 5 and the economic opportunities that it would create. You don't expect any further delay because my fear is the inflation. I'm not an economist. I don't, for example, I don't see the price going down anytime soon, or milk, right? When they go up, it's sometimes not reversible. So we don't expect any further delays if the inflation rates or the economy doesn't change as far as the project being able to move forward in a timely manner.
I can't prognosticate that because the bid that they opened in November was 58% over budget, and I don't know how much engineering or how much architectural work they can do to cut that down to where it still can function to the extent that it needs to. We're hopeful. I mean, our applicant is actually relocated here from Kansas, so we're hopeful that they can reformulate their plans so we can get off the ground. But we're trying to be patient. We also have things that we need to do to make this site where it's shovel-ready, including some significant infrastructure work. And while we've eased the throttle back on those three projects, they're still going forward. And we had an engineering meeting today in these chambers, and we told them to keep going, but don't go past the point where they've got the bid documents ready to go, because we've got to see exactly where the applicant is going with his plan.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I just ask that if there are developments with this, would you please keep us abreast of what's developing? And I'm really hopeful. I know many residents in our community are very hopeful about the opportunities that both of these businesses will bring in the future. And I know we're talking about, what is it called, MTG. And then there is also the jet facility, right, the engine facility that.
Global Turbine Services contract has expired for reasons other than the economy, and that will be outlined in the annual report that the city manager is putting together right now. But Global Turbine Services is no longer headed to skip. We've got other prospects in the area that we're working with, but we don't have an active contract in the Soldier Creek Industrial Park.
Thank you so much. I will follow up with you later about that one. Thanks.
Chair, to entertain a motion to approve number 2.
Move to approve.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Number 3, Ms. Bennett.
I'm sorry. Move to approve.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Now move into public discussion. Does anyone have anything to bring before the authority? Hearing or seeing none, we are hereby adjourned. We move back to and call back in order the Midwest City Hospital Authority, and we do have an executive session. Mr. Lyon.
Discussion, consideration, and possible action of entering into an executive session is allowed under 25 OS 307B3 to discuss the purchase or appraisal of the real estate or the real property located within the city near 8800 to 8832 Southeast 29th, or 13.288 acres located in the northeast quarter of Section 14, Township 11 North, Range 2 West, and then in Meridian, Oklahoma County, as well as the real property located within near the 301 North Midwest Boulevard, 1.73 acres located in the northeast quarter, southeast quarter of the southeast quarter of Section 34, Township 12, 2 West, Range 2 West, and then in Meridian, and in open session authorizing the general manager or administrator to take action as appropriate based on the discussion in executive session.
Chair, to entertain a motion to move into executive session. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now in the executive session. Thank you for being here, and we'll ask that you exit the building.